evening and welcome to African Voices platform on Sheffield Live TV. My name is Tchiyiwe Chihana. Tonight we're talking about iGaming in Africa, and our colleague Teté, who is a PhD candidate at the University of Sheffield, has put together a panel of experts that will speak more to the subject. Teté, good evening and welcome.
Hi, Tchiyiwe. Thank you. Nice to see you. I am Teté Mausse, a PhD candidate at University of Sheffield, and also a contributing partner for the African Voices platform. So tonight we're going to be exploring the hot topic, which is the evolution and the sustainability of iGaming, also known as gambling, in Africa. So I'm joined by an expert who's also a doctoral researcher at the University of Ulster, and his name is Tunde Adebisi. Tunde, if you just like to say hi.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Tunde. So without much ado, iGaming, which is also known as gambling, because iGaming is really the umbrella under which all sorts of gambling and betting activities, online activities specifically, fall under. So this has become a trend and a phenomenon in Africa as connectivity as well as e-commerce expands throughout the continent. So international operators as well as local operators have been seeping through the continent, becoming huge economic resources as well as entertainment activities throughout the continent, in particular with the youth. Kenya, for instance, has the largest youth population of iGambling, specifically sports betting. And our colleague, Tunde Adebisi, is an expert on sports betting, specifically in Nigeria. So as we go along, he'll be sharing his inputs and his ideas as to what is going on with us in the continent. So to begin, Tunde, what is gambling and what falls within gambling?
All right, so gambling is, I think gambling is part of our everyday life. For us Africans, and particularly the male folks, we love challenges and we love to be challenged. And most often than not, when you are challenged, you are asked to put your money where your mouth is. So if you claim something is true or false, they'll be like, okay, oh yeah, put your money. So taking risk or hope for something could be advanced as gambling. I believe it has close proximity to expectations. As you may know already, gambling is of two major types, game of chance or game of luck. And there's this one called game of skill. Football betting falls under the game of skill because you could apply some level of logic, level of skill to predict games. You could look at match features, and you are able to tell what team could do well. So that is largely considered as a game of skill. But we are, on the other hand, we have game of luck or game of chance, which is completely dependent on chance. So we have things like the lottery, the lotto, the dice, card games, and all of similar ones. So, well, I think bookies have a way of coming on board. We have recognized bookies, we have OneXBet, we have stuff like that. And so they have institutionalized gambling and make it something that is like a service or a product that could be sold. In Africa, we also have many informal bookies that are not recognized. And in my hometown, they call it Onile, which literally translates to the owner of the house. So this set of people, they are the one who gather the stakes, and they put the stakes together for those who want to challenge themselves on certain event or whatever it is. So yeah, that's what I would describe as gambling. It's part of our everyday life, But yes, bookies have now taken advantage of that to sell it as a product.
I'm intrigued though. Yeah, thanks so much, Tunde. That's very informative. So I was trying to understand, and perhaps you could clarify that, Teté, because I know you've recently been to an iGaming festival. Does gambling fall under iGaming? Is that what it is, or is the umbrella concept just gambling for that sector?
Is that for me? Sorry.
You can take it, Tunde. Yeah, you can take it. Oh, yeah.
You're asking if the umbrella concept is iGaming?
Yeah, so we talked about gambling, but I know there's the whole, when you were talking about 1xBet and all those punters, not punters, but what do you call them? What's the term you use to describe?
I said bookies.
Bookies, yeah, them. So what's the difference between gambling and iGaming, or is that the same thing?
Well, I think the concept of iGaming could refer to online gambling, an activity that could be done online, if I'm not mistaken, because the high prefix indicates that this is an activity that has an online presence. So it's literally, to me, an activity, the gambling activity that is done
electronically, online.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Teté, I'm going to hand back to you, but I'm intrigued. I think we've got another guest that's going to be joining us shortly. You went to the iGaming festival in Nairobi. What was that about? What's the whole concept before we get into the details of this whole concept?
Interestingly enough, that's where our guest as well, who's going to be joining us, Mr. David Moshi, has also a lot of expertise, which is SIGMA. SIGMA stands for the World Gaming Festival, and it's never been held before in Africa. This was the first time that it was held in Africa, in Kenya, Nairobi specifically. There are reasons for this. And as mentioned before, Nairobi is definitely a continental trendsetter when it comes to technology, especially when it comes to the internet space, and as well as e-commerce with the push of M-Pesa. So given that, Nairobi works out as an excellent place to be able to launch the iGaming space into the continent. So at Sigma, we had various categories of the iGaming, but in Africa, more popularly known as gambling space, which is your horse racing and others that Tunde has mentioned, right? So you can have horse racing, you can have dog racing, you can have all of these different elements. But this is more of a formal space. Those tend to be more of the unregulated informal spaces. And the ones that were at the World Gaming Festival are more of the formal players. So this was an opportunity for them to showcase themselves, but also to network and to see how it is that they can also be supported in terms of developing regulation and what is known as responsible gambling into the continent, to be recognized as an official and regulated industry.
All right. Okay, that's quite a hefty lot of information, but thank you. So I'm getting from what you're saying that some aspects of this are unregulated, some are regulated, but it's a thriving industry. I mean, I was in Zambia just in December, and goodness me, there's so many people that I know that are participating in this. This was not something I used to see before. I would like to ask our other guest, Mr. Moshi, to put his video on if he's ready, so he can speak more to this concept. And yeah, and Teté, I'll leave this with you for now.
Yes, so David, hi, thank you for joining us. It's so lovely to have you. So David is the managing director of Velex Group, which is an international consortium of advisory and legal services. And they are a heavy player in Africa and the world across when it comes to the facilitation of operators into the landscapes of different localities. So David, if you could just give us your perspective as to what you believe iGambling is, and at the same time, what are the different categories that fall within it?
We probably will come back to David at a later time. Perhaps you could speak a bit more to how this industry is growing on the continent of Africa, especially your specialization is in sports, from what I gather. So how has this industry grown in Africa?
It's massive. It's massive. You know, Africa is a football-obsessed continent. It is not a game originally, but we've come to accept the game. And yes, a lot of, and I believe strongly that gambling is growing on the back of football. And sport betting itself, especially football betting, is really a big deal. It's something that resonates with people. It's something that could easily catch their fancy because it's something they are used to. It's a sport they are familiar with. And yes, and the gambling industry knows this very well. So they are taking this advantage to sell a product that they definitely know that will resonate with the people. So my short answer would be yes, it's really a thriving industry. And well, I saw an article recently about the growth of the industry in my home country, and you wouldn't believe that this industry is put at par with the oil and gas industry, and that's really, really massive. It's indicative of how massive the industry is.
And we were saying at par, we are talking money, being at par financially, economically, and economic viability.
Yes, in terms of contribution to government revenue, it's really a big deal.
Amazing, amazing. Fun. Now, one of the reasons why you really took an interest in this is that you had registered some concerns. I wondered whether you could put those forward. What concerns did you have about regulation? Again, you're muted, Teté.
Right. So one of the most, I think, topical issues when it comes to gambling. So Tunde touched on it, the fact that it is huge, lots of revenue involved.
Yeah.
But there is a disconnection between that revenue and what the government is receiving. So this presents a missed opportunity in lots of aspects. I would want to further ask Tunde what these aspects could also be. But to my mind, it's things like employment opportunities. It's things like training opportunities. It is also things like loss of taxes, and furthermore, the loss of the ability for the government to be able to use these funds and more positive spaces. This is where we bring in the sustainability aspect. So in Kenya, for instance, this is where I am based. It is also quite a large industry. So I think the three largest destinations in Africa, South Africa, Kenya, and then Nigeria.
Okay.
And these are also places. So, yes.
Okay. We seem to be losing you intermittently, Teté. So we lost you. But I believe you were giving us a landscape of where the biggest industries are in the iGaming sector. And did you say South Africa? Could you just repeat those countries?
Yes, so Nigeria, South Africa, and Kenya, which are also countries that have a large unemployed youth. So you can already see the pool toward in those places, and simultaneously also places where, again, excellent technology and excellent e-commerce. So you can already see the pull towards and the attraction towards gambling, more specifically sports betting, because in the continent, gambling is being driven and propelled by sports betting. We all know that Africa is sports manic, specifically football. So wherever you have football lovers, you've got a lot of youth, you've got the immense opportunity and possibility to have betting. The challenge here comes with all of those missed opportunities that I mentioned earlier. So Tunde, if you could just add to this in terms of what does this lack of regulation mean at large in terms of the loss to Africa?
So if I understand the question, you're trying to ask me what the regulation means for Africa, the current state of regulation, right? Well, I would like to start by saying the biggest local gambling operator in Nigeria is owned by a legislator. in my country. And well, I wouldn't say more than that. Well, secondly, we do more of licensing in Africa than regulation. I believe these are two different things. Apart from the provision that prohibits gambling services from being sold to persons under the age of 18, I'm yet to see how my government regulates gambling. Yet, even the policing of this particular law is unclear. The focus is more on licensing and various fines that punishes operators if found wanting. For instance, in Northern Ireland, I have attended a couple of inquiry report presentation on reducing gambling-related harm. I've also been invited to produce an evidence-based report for the same purpose. This kind of report aids legislation and informs policy on gambling generally in the UK, but we're yet to see stuff like this in Africa. And I feel one of the reasons for the growth of the industry is because it is largely unregulated in Africa, and many of these bookies are bound. They are banned in their home country, but they find liberalized environments like Africa too, and they thrive in such places. So
hold on, Tunde. So the bookies are not necessarily of African residents, and then it's not people from Africa, it's people from outside Africa that are actually setting these establishments up.
Absolutely, they are transnational companies. They are, of course, one expert is obviously not an African company, but it's all over Africa. So that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Like what I referenced earlier about the biggest local gambling operator in my country is owned by a legislator in my country. So we have a mixture of both international companies and local operators. Well, the industry is not just about operators anyways. It comprises of internal stakeholders and external stakeholders. So the internals are obviously the operators, and the external stakeholders are like the people who design the interface for the website, the hub for the company, the people who market their product. You know, it's a combination of a lot of stakeholders.
Okay. Teté, I'm just gonna take over just a little bit because I'm intrigued by this concept. I'm learning so much. I would laugh because when you said it's led by licensing and less regulation, I would laugh because it smells like money, it looks like money, and it's obviously a lot of money, and so we've prioritized that. So are these bookies then working on a franchise basis, and do they have African partners? You sounded like you did say that Nigeria gets good revenue from it, but I'm wondering whether that's the same in a country like Zambia. Quite recently, my young sister is an artist in Zambia, and 1xBet has got a good marketing strategy where they use artists maybe to promote the code and so. But are there locally based people that have franchises? What sort of partnerships are there? And when you're there, maybe I'll just check if Mr. Moshi is now available to join us, because I also want to talk about the other end, the users, the people who consume and enable this environment to thrive. So yeah, if you could just pick up a little bit on that.
Right, definitely they have franchises. There is this other stakeholder I didn't mention. They call them point of sales. And so they are the ticketers, they are the walk-in store where you can purchase a gambling service or gambling product. Aside the ones available online, there are also physical spaces where you can walk into to patronize a particular bookie. So yes, of course, the structure of the industry is something that is not really talked about. It is something that is not really out there, but the structure is, I mean, I can just put it I can just categorize them into three parts: the operators, the suppliers, and the point of sales. So these people exist in different countries, and usually in a country like Nigeria, you would probably not find bookies who own a particular gambling brand. You just have point of sales, and that is how they are able to establish. These transnational companies are able to establish their brand in a particular country. So yeah, they do rely on franchise, and yeah, that's what I can say about that.
I must say though that when I was at Sigma, particular attention was paid to this issue that you bring up, Tunde, talking about. The focus is usually on registration, on licensing. And that in itself is quite problematic because there's a bit of a gatekeeping element going on there. Because mostly in almost every 49 sub-Saharan country, gambling is actually either illegal or conditionally limited. And these are post-colonial, or should I say colonial inheritances that haven't been updated. So what this also means, this focus on licensing, is that the structure is not paid attention to. And even in terms of the practices of the consumer, but similarly the practices of the bookers, the focus is more on who are the limited amount of bookies, or as you say, or even casinos, or who are the limited amount of license holders. Who are these people? And why is it that in some countries, it's 30, 40 years after colonialism, right, that we still haven't tapped into this area?
Was that a question for Tunde, or did you just want to make a comment on it? Like this is how it turned out at the festival.
And for Tunde, so in Nigeria, for example, why is it that so many years after, and with this industry being so rife, why is it that legislation or licensing has either remained in the hands of gatekeepers or just been neglected?
Well, it's something I'm hoping to find out myself, but well, the best I can say for now is the comment I've made earlier. I strongly believe this the revenue generated by gambling is really an incentive that makes a lot of things overlooked, and yeah, it favors the. I mean, if you want to look at it this way, I wanted to say something about the perceived benefit of the industry, and I mean, if you have to really want to understand the benefits, you have to look at in a multi-level way. I would recommend that this should be looked into in a micro, meso, and a macro scale, because a keen look at the gambling scene, we will notice three major stakeholders: the industry, the gamblers, and the government. But who are the biggest beneficiaries of the industry, the presence in Africa? If you want to start with the industry, you might have heard of the saying that the house never loses, or the house always wins. I mean, I was seeing this documentary by the BBC, who's the lead narrator, Colin, is a friend. Excuse me. There is a guy in that documentary, goes by the name Alan Jagwe. He's a sports betting system programmer. And he said something, and I quote, he said, the algorithm will try its best to always make the house wins. And he said, the only way I can propose you make a living out of betting is to work for a betting company. So,
and not be somebody who is gambling, rather be on the other side, right?
Right. So gambling is never a gamble to the operators and to all the stakeholders within the gambling industry. But for the government now, we certainly know that the growth of the industry in Africa has provided additional revenue stream to the government. It is huge, but you ask yourself, to whose detriment?
Right.
To whose detriment? Such funds are coming from individuals who thought they could make a living from the promise or hope availed to them by the industry. Of course, for the industry to make money, there must be more losers than winners. And for the industry to make so much money to the extent of not just increasing government revenue, but also sponsoring national teams and even local and European football leagues, there must be millions or billions of steady, habitual, constant losers. That is how it is. So to whose benefit and to whose detriment?
Wow. I think that's one thing we hadn't really gotten into, and I'm glad that you've actually tapped into that. So we're talking about who is enabling and who is actually sustaining this industry. So it's that person on the ground that is actually consuming, and like you reliably said earlier, it's hope. You play on people's hope, and people hope they can actually win whatever it is that they're looking to do. Mr. Moshi, I'm just checking that you're with us, so you could speak a bit more to that.
Hello?
We can hear you, Mr. Moshi. Go ahead.
You hear me? Yeah,
yes, we hear you.
Wanted me to weigh in. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know which question, because I think, of course, I was following the discussions, but on which specific area do you want me to give in my input? Pretty well, because I followed the discussions and looking at certain points that have been mentioned, I may probably differ. Well, advised by the fact that I think I've worked in this industry for more than almost 30 years. And of course, I have seen the change and development of the industry over time. From, in Kenya, from having 3 casinos that were operating sometimes in early 80s and late 90s, to now, of course, the changes that have taken place. And we could ask ourselves, what has been the impact, or how has the industry revolutionized or taken a change over a period of time? First of all, I think there is a statement that you've been saying that it is illegal. Well, any activity that probably is undertaken without proper licensing, you classify it as illegal. Where you have laws that exist and allow an activity to take place, then you understand it's legal. So we have to separate. For illegal operators, of course, in any market where they are operating, it's illegal. It's not acceptable. I would wish to speak for say East Africa, Kenya. As far as I know, there are legislations, there's rules. They may be running behind technology because technology has moved in very fast. But yes, that's the trend where we are moving at in terms of development. And of course, I'm not saying gambling or gaming. Traditionally, you would need to go into the history on how it has evolved and changed. And of course, you definitely require regulations for the activity to be controlled, just like any other vice. If it is drinking, it's considered as a vice, or when people overindulge.
Yeah.
And so different jurisdictions where gaming has been allowed or takes place, as far as I know, there is legislation and there is regulations. Of course, where there is no express prohibition, it remains to be a green area. But certainly, gaming should, of course, operate within a regulated environment.
Yeah.
It may be that the regulations are weak, they need enforcement. It requires probably certain rules to be put in place, not just as my colleague has mentioned, not just capping the age factor. As far as I know, in Kenya, the gaming board has tremendously tried its level best to put in rules and guidelines.
Okay, so just
to ensure
enlighten
that
us.
The activity is undertaken.
Yeah. Enlighten us, because I'm totally blank on how this industry operates. So when you talk about the regulator, which ministry takes responsibility for that regulator in Kenya, for example? Or what would I expect in a country like Zambia, for instance?
Well, let me say from a background of understanding that, because I've had the opportunity to go into different jurisdictions. And therefore, you will either have a gaming commission, a gaming board, you'd have a national lottery, and in different jurisdictions. As we move on with the discussion, I would like us to look at the different jurisdictions, because you can't lump Africa as one jurisdiction. There are different countries. If, for instance, you come to Kenya, currently it's under the Ministry of Interior. Well, if you go to Zambia, it's a different matter altogether, and the way it is structured is differently. And of course, depending on how the industry is developing. And therefore, as we move on with the discussion, I think you need to be very clear. I mean, as you discuss, are we looking at weak frameworks that exist? Or are you looking at a case whereby you are in an environment where there are totally no rules, so that then as an activity is illegal to undertake, and it's expressly like, so that, from a government point of view, that it is a banned activity. There are nations where, yes, gambling is banned, and it's expressly, it's known, it's banned. But where we are looking at in nations whereby the activity is being undertaken, of course, there are regulations. There may be weak regulations. They may be falling behind the technology that is being developed and evolving. And you have to look at the reality. And the issue here is having strong regulatory framework. Not saying that there are no rules or guidelines within all nations. No.
Okay, so there will be a regulatory framework. Is there somewhere where this sits as well in the African Union at all, given, I mean, Tunde was just educating us on how in Nigeria, potentially, that industry is at par with the oil industry in bringing in revenue. So is there a sit in the African Union that's looking at this type of revenue at all?
Well, I don't want to diverge into a subject whereby I'm not an expert, in terms of the African Union, what the African Union's mandate is. I would like to look at it as an industry, as a business, and we focus on it as a business that is being undertaken. And there are players within the industry who are undertaking this activity. There is development of technology that is, driving the business. That's how you look at it. And you look at it that this industry, is it working within?
No, absolutely. We'll definitely get to that. I just wondered, because if it's such a big economic earner for the continent, I just wondered where the seats of power are sitting. It is a business. I appreciate that. But Tunde, what are your reflections so far now that we've heard from Mr. Moshi?
Well, I think it is my colleague is absolutely spot on and what he has said. It's not like we don't have regulations, but to be honest, we need to do more with what we currently do have. I don't know if it is okay for me to compare with my experience in Northern Ireland. I know I have been exposed to some of the realities over there. Aside the government, we have a lot of NGOs who try to advocate for safer gambling, responsible gambling, and a couple of those organizations. So it is not just something that should be left to the government. We should embrace corporate or social responsibility. The industry should be made to also understand some of the excesses that might really bring harm to the people. I think long and short of the whole thing is the regulation should get better.
Thank you, Tunde. Teté, back to you.
Right. So my question at the Sigma, I mentioned that
Mr. Moshi, you could mute yourself, Mr. Moshi. Mr. Moshi, if you could mute yourself.
The challenge is the companies, the bookers that Tchiyiwe, can I go on?
Yeah, you can proceed. So we just had feedback from Mr. Moshi's phone. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I was saying, so there's an imbalance that's going on here. So there's a power dynamic of, you've got, as a Kenya Currencies and Trading Authority, which I think is where the gambling board sits in Kenya, an officer mentioned at the Sigma that there's an opportunity for a copy and paste. So reapplying what has happened or what has been learned from the West and brought into African spaces. Now, the challenge with that is now we are creating an imbalanced and unfair power dynamic, because what are these reapplications that we're bringing into the continent? And the continent is at a disadvantage, whether it's the consumer or it is the structure itself, because it means that we are again being dictated to, being fed. We are importing waste. And how does that benefit the African consumer at the end? And also the African government that will provide to the African consumer through taxes, right? Through the benefits of taxes. Right. But at the same time, I think there's a further imbalance of how does one have responsible gambling, but at the same time have consumer growth? Because it is either you have more clients, which means you're getting more of the youth, the particular main population group that gambles, right? Sports betting in particular. So either you have more clients, or you have more people spending money, or you've got longer playing hours. And at the same time, when we look at our continent, right, our continent has a huge challenge of alcohol addiction. I mean, most African countries have people that are over drinkers, so drinking more than what should be the legal consumption for a day or a week. So it's almost like we are also now creating a further layer of addiction, which is resulting in very detrimental results, right? So what I'd like to know is what do Tunde and David have to say to this imbalance that we are creating, and how is it that we can balance the two? Because it's almost like we're talking about an oxymoron here.
I hear, and I'm at a point whereby I want to look at it that, you know, businesses that are licensed, there's a reason why, you know, they are licensed and to be regulated in order to have some level of control. Because if you don't license an activity, then it will operate underground. And therefore, it's all about where do you strike the balance. There's always the issues of responsible gaming being raised. There are certain principles that need to be laid out for any regulator and responsible regulator would definitely endeavor to ensure that the activity is undertaken in a responsible manner. And it's clearly outlined on certain do's and certain don'ts here. For instance, I'll give, for example, marketing. I've seen a lot of regulators coming in and weighing in order to moderate the level of marketing that goes out. But then look at it, technology has evolved and developed. Years back, we would not be able to communicate. As for now, almost everyone has a gadget. Information, we are almost in an information age where information passes through. And so you have to give it up to the regulators the much they can try to. You can ban billboards. I've seen that happening in many countries.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a matter of trying to balance out and ensure that, yes, the activity is undertaken, because if it is not undertaken in a regulated environment, then it will go under. It will still operate.
Yeah.
So I wish that probably proposals should be given out on how best can we have best practices and regulations. I think that's the best, that should be the discussion.
Okay.
That yes, we need regulations that will be able to at least have some level of good control, ensure the underage, the vulnerable are protected. And that's it. That's an open discussion. That's a continuous discussion. I know within different jurisdictions, within different continents, that's a discussion that continues. And of course, for any nation that feels that it's an activity they don't want, purely there are countries that have banned gaming.
Mm.
It's a decision the government needs to take. But then, look, you have businessmen. Purely, she's given an example of alcohol. We have breweries. We've seen, let me give, for instance, a good example, tobacco consumption.
Mm-hmm.
We have been with time, and in certain nations, the consumption has gone low because there are regulations that have been put in place. So for me, it's
Right.
the issue of having good, strong regulation or regulatory framework and implementation or enforcement of the same in order to try and moderate, because here the word would be to moderate the level of activity and participation amongst the vulnerable.
Okay, David,
That's how I look at it.
I think now that we've got very good internet coming from you, now that you're properly stabilized, let me just say thank you to Mr. Adebisi, Tunde Adebisi, who has been with us, and then we can get on and talk more about your work, Mr. Moshi. So thank you very much, Tunde.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. David, when your phone was we couldn't get through, Teté had asked you to talk about your work. We wanted to understand more about what you do, what Velex does. So maybe use this moment to tell us more about your work as well.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity also for me to be able to tell you in terms of what we do or what I do. Velex is an advisory company, part of Velex Group, and we basically have positioned ourselves to offer services within the gaming industry. Of course, what we do is to help support companies that would wish to enter a market. For instance, if it is Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, grow their market and provide other auxiliary services. And we are not just within the gaming sector, but also in the tech sector, technology sector, so that then we also help companies that want to enter into that space, payment solution providers, just knowing that this is part of solutions that help to enhance and develop a business in different ways. And therefore, if I would just zero down that within the gaming sector, of course, we would assist any person who wants to get into that space, give them the necessary support, including recruitment of staff, compliance areas that are required, helping them to understand the markets with the research and advisory. And upon them getting the license, also give them a hand and support to stabilize within a specific market that they want to enter into. Of course, Velex, we from Kenya, we serve the East African region, Central Africa, part of Zambia, and Mozambique. So that gives us some depth of knowledge and understanding on how different regulators are able to undertake their regulatory mandates within these different countries. And therefore, that's why you saw me strongly saying that, you know, when you speak about illegal gambling, you need to have your facts right and know and understand that when you're saying illegal, in which country has this been prohibited? So basically, as Velex, that's where we position ourselves in order to be able to provide support services to gaming entities that want to enter into different jurisdictions.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hope I've answered you in terms of what we do. We have a team that serves the West Africa region, and us in East Africa. We have also affiliate offices in Dubai.
But David, what has been the stumbling block? What has been holding African countries? Why are they still holding on to colonial policies that ban gambling in the countries that you operate? What have you found?
I don't know. You're making a very strong statement. That why have they held on onto colonial? I don't know whether I should say there's anything colonial. What I would look at is the aspect of that we need, because who makes the laws for our nations? If I may ask you, is the leaders that you and I choose. We are given opportunity to make proposals. That happens. So, and the world has become, is moving into almost one global village. And therefore, the discussion would be, it's a decision for us to, and take it to our legislatures, for them, if we feel, and we can petition, if you feel that you don't want this activity, then do petition, make a petition, the law is there. If you feel the regulations are weak, make proposals, so that then we develop, instead of demonizing something, because you need to dive into the history of an activity to have asked yourself, why is it that these activities are allowed and made legal? I'm not saying that I'm a promoter of gaming, but what I'm saying is, since the law in many countries where it is undertaken, you have laws that allow the activity, is an issue of looking at it, not being general, and we have to be very specific. And it's developing, it's evolving. Look, when you're talking of gaming, let's look at gaming. I'm sure if you have a kid in your house, you must have bought them a PlayStation or so. What are they doing when they have a PlayStation? So of course, it's at that level, you don't allow.
They're gaming.
Exactly. So there's of course, and it's an issue of that. Now you need to look at it that yes, what do you need to do
So is the
in
difference
order to
though,
separate and ensure that
is the difference though that they're gaming for fun and gaming for money are two different things though?
exactly you have it's developing to esports. I don't know whether you've heard that
Yeah,
term.
absolutely, yeah.
We have now the development of esports where people are competing.
Right.
So it's an issue of we can't lay back and look at it that yes, the African countries are not doing this. We need to look at it and have a discussion and say, what if it is bad? Let's petition our lawmakers. If we feel it is bad, let's petition our lawmakers.
Okay, so because time is fast moving on us, let me latch on to what you've just said, David. What you've just said about the industry. So one thing you did recently was that you were a bronze sponsor for this for the festival in Africa, the iGaming festival. What did that entail? So what would Velex be doing? What was the purpose? What was it you went to showcase as Velex at the festival?
Basically, for us, is showcase our services. That's it. It's like you have a law firm, and well, you provide for services, that borders to support any entity. Look, any entity must be having functional areas, whether it's human resource recruitment, whether it's financial service, tax advisory, and that's what we do.
Yeah.
So basically, we were there in order to
promote
present ourselves, and of course get clients and provide support services. Yeah, create awareness of who we are.
And what do you think, with that being the very first festival of its kind on the African continent, what's the trajectory in your opinion as Velex? Where are we going? Is it a thriving industry that's only going to grow? What was your biggest takeaway from that Sigma Festival? Well,
that has not been my only conference that I have attended. I would say so. We have had such forums happening within Africa.
Was this the largest though?
And of course, we get. Let me note, Sigma. Look, this is a brand, Sigma. So if you're talking about Sigma being, it wasn't the first one. There was Sigma event that happened in, I think, Tanzania. Must have been probably a year before. So looking at it, it's just an event that happens that brings together exhibitors within the industry who want to expose their products that exist and create awareness that they exist within a market, and they would wish anyone who want to get into that space that yes, they are the service providers, and they can get partners just like any other business. So it's an issue of business opportunity that exists, that are being created. Look at it.
And opportunities. I mean, when we're thinking of Kenya on the African continent, we think of Kenya as, I think, one of the leaders, if not the foremost leader, when it comes to technology, using technology and advancing technology in multiple ways that is very much suited to the African situation. For example, when they did M-Pesa was one of the leaders. So I think technologically, these are some of the opportunities that are being created perhaps in this industry.
Sure. In Kenya, I can tell you without any doubt that we have an educated, well-educated population of the youth that are coming up. Technologically, I think we moving very fast. And those are the opportunities I think we need to bring at and be discussing that, even as that some of them are uploaded on, on these platforms that, are being brought about. We need to have a discussion and say, yes, our youth are very good. They are able to develop such games that can be utilized, that can be sold out there. So it's an issue of yeah, you look from one point, there are opportunities that, you know, should be created for our youth to be able to export some of this talent outside. Because what has always been is that, of course, most of our time in Africa, we end up being importers. But I think in terms of knowledge, yeah, we at a point in Kenya that we can be able to export our expertise in technological knowledge. And look, M-Pesa, and it rivals. I mean, you go to anywhere. I mean, it's a very unique product. And therefore, it's an issue of, if you are able to develop technology, then you can be able to export it out there and look at the good that it has brought about.
Right.
Having helped financial inclusion, having helped development and the way we do business in Kenya. So it's something that we can be proud of and pick of what good we can develop and sell it out there, export it out there, expand it out there.
Well, it's a pity that we have actually run out of time. Would have loved to spend more time talking to you, Mr. Moshi. Thank you so much for joining us on African Voices platform, which will be airing on Sheffield Live tonight.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for the time and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
That was African Voices platform with Tunde, David, and myself, Tchiyiwe Chihana. Good night and thanks for joining us.